Hi, today's iOS tutorial will be about Grand Central Dispatch. Grand Central Dispatch is a method for allowing code to be executed concurrently. That is to say, while I'm doing one block of code, I can do another block of code on a different thread. And this allows me to do two tasks at once and improve the overall efficiency of my program. Normally, code is executed in a serial fashion. That is to say, it's deterministic, it executes the same way every time, and each line is executed before the next line starts. Whereas concurrent means that two chunks of code will execute at the same time. And this is different because while each one of these individual blocks of code executes one line before the next line, there's no way to know where on one thread what line it is relative to the other thread. Okay, so this raises another number of issues. The pro of concurrency is obviously that it speeds up the program execution, and because you can do two things at once. But the con is there's no way to know. It doesn't have the same deterministic behavior, so it becomes much more difficult to debug, and we have to take into account certain things that can happen because there's no way to know what interleavings that the two different processes have of their instructions. To give you an example, this is what's known as a race condition. Okay, and these arrows here can be thought of as processes. Now, you see that this bank account has $782. Both processes get that number. One process adds $100, the other adds $200, and then the first process saves, but then the next process saves. So what happens is essentially we lost $200 here. And that's because we haven't implemented synchronization. This is one of the hazards of concurrent programming. So we always have to make sure that there's no race conditions and that any individual unit of code is thread safe. This is an overview of GCD. To use concurrency in Objective-C, we place blocks on queues. The operating system handles the rest. In other words, all you have to do is decide which portions of code you want to execute concurrently, put them in blocks, and then place those blocks on the queue. In order to handle thread safety, you must make sure that all UIKit updates happen on the main thread. And in order to prevent race conditions, you have to add synchronization. So for that, we're going to use the group feature of GCD. So for this example, I'm going to go over how to use GCD and how to add synchronization via groups. Okay, so we're going to get started on a new project. I'm just going to create a new Xcode project. We will single view. We'll call it GCD tutorial example. Then we're going to click next and create. So in our storyboard.main, we're not going to do much. All we're going to do is add a label here because I want it to display something in this label when we're done. And I'm going to go ahead and stretch this out, and we're going to center it on the screen. So here, we're going to do that, we're going to do that, and that's all I wanted to do. Now, what we have to do is we're going to have to add an outlet for that. So we're going to go to H. Okay, and from there, we're going to go to our viewcontroller.m. And here, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create two arrays just filled in with numbers 1 through 10. Okay, so the idea here is array X just has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Same thing with array Y. But to store things in NS array, we can't just use integers because typecast of type ID to integer is not supported. And all elements of an array must be pointers to Objective-C object. So we have to cast everyone as a number. So we just give it a whole bunch of number objects. We don't actually have pointers to each individual number, but this will work for our purposes. Next, what we're going to do is I'm going to have it calculate some result based on these numbers concurrently, and we're going to use the GCD. So here's our GCD call. As you can see, first we have our group. We're going to need that group for later. And then we have a queue. Okay? And then what we just do is we do dispatch group asynchronous, name of the group, which is group, queue, which is queue. We just used the default queue for this. And then what I did was I took a sum here and I basically multiplied all the numbers together here in y. So same thing. This block, this identifier means that when it modifies the x total variable in the block, it also modifies it in this public scope of the view.did.load. So that means that we can use this later to calculate a result. And now what we're going to do is we're just going to add the two together. All right. Now here, what I'm doing is I'm just going to change that output label to the x total and y total. And normally you would provide some synchronization here, but I'm going to show you what happens when we don't do that, just as a teaching exercise. So here we have no synchronization. We're going to go ahead. We got a really weird number. Okay, if you look back at what the number should be, it should not be that number. Okay, and that's because the code did not execute. The interleaving wasn't correct. It tried to do this before it was done this. But if we do this, dispatch group wait, what that will do is ensure that both this dispatch and this dispatch complete before any further code is executed below this line. So now when we run it, that is the correct number if you calculate it out. So that was a pretty quick review, but that's generally all you need to use GCD. The complicated thing is making sure that we don't have any race conditions and we're using it at the appropriate times. So this has been another iOS tutorial.